Good morning.
Hello, world.
The beast hath wakened.
Yeah. Oh man, This is probably the most tired I've been actually.
Oh, for real?
Um, yeah. So you know that I'm playing Persona 4.
Yeah,
So it's a game that I both enjoy and am annoyed with.
yeah. Okay.
They do some things with their mechanics that are a little bit unappealing, such as not having frequent save points.
Okay, so you're stuck playing like several hours in a row and you don't want to?
Yeah, kind of. Like I started playing at I don't know, like 11:30 or something, thinking I'd just put a half hour in before I go to bed.
Uh-huh.
And then yeah, so there's two things that make the game kind of unappealing. One is that the save points can be infrequent, and also it's really easy to die.
I
It,
see.
it's like
Brutal.
you've got a four-party team, and like three of the characters can die, no problem. Who cares? As soon as the
Mm.
battle's over, they're alive again with one hit point.
Okay.
But that main character, if he dies, it's game over.
I see.
Like you don't even have the ability to resurrect him in battle or anything. Like as soon as he's dead, it's game over. So if you haven't been grinding and stuff, and then an enemy decides to one-shot you,
That's
and
it.
you haven't been able to save it for 40 minutes,
Oh,
it's not the most fun experience in the world.
right, right.
So yeah, I was playing at like 11:30, and silly me decided to start a dungeon, and I went through like 7 floors, expecting that there would be a save point before the boss, and there wasn't. So then I didn't want to lose all my treasure and leveling up and everything, so because I knew there was no chance I was going to beat the boss.
Uh-huh.
So then I had to like backtrack out of the dungeon.
So, what time were you up till?
Um, so I was interrupted partway through because my kid woke up and I wanted to put him back to sleep. So
Mm.
by the time I finished with that and then got out of the dungeon and stuff, it was around 2 a.m. And then he didn't sleep particularly well last night and then woke up at 6 a.m.
Brutal.
So it was an interrupted 4 hours of sleep.
Brutal. Brutal. Well, thank you for making it out today. I don't quite have the same sob story as you, but
Yeah.
my daughter's actually sick right now, and my wife's out on a super early morning errand, so I'm kind of sitting here praying that she doesn't wake up all stuffy and
Right.
screamy. Um, but yeah.
Nice.
Any other impressions from Persona 4?
Yeah.
What are the
Yeah, I guess
positives?
it would be unfair to leave it on a negative note because I'm actually really enjoying the game otherwise.
Cool.
I think that just that mechanic with the instant death, easy instant death, and the lack of saving is the biggest annoyance. But otherwise, it's a pretty unique game.
Mm.
It was on PlayStation 2, and I think graphically it still holds up. The soundtrack is kind of like J-poppy and stuff, like with actual instruments and stuff. So that holds up pretty well and is a nice difference from games I'm used to.
Mm.
Um, and so it's kind of like a combination between I guess it's like a combination of a roguelike RPG uh, life sim,
Okay.
uh, which I say roguelike just because the dungeons are different each time you enter them.
So it is
Um,
like it's not like a set in stone dungeon. It's like randomized somehow.
yeah, it's like you're always guaranteed that the boss is going to be on level number X, but uh, yeah, it's like the hallways respawn differently and the enemy positions are different each time. So, um, in that sense, I also I guess kind of find it a little bit less appealing as well, just because
Mm.
the hallways and stuff feel very samey.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
know it's
no,
not really your thing.
yeah, but I really like the story, which you're some high school students that stumble upon a mystery that you've got to solve, and I don't know, it's really good. Um, I can understand, especially for the time, why it got such high ratings.
Hmm. Cool. How long is it?
Supposedly 80 hours.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm about 12 into it so far,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I it's so Persona's been on my like check out list. Not so much
Yeah.
like play necessarily, but I do hear a lot of things about it. So
Yeah, it's so when I say the life sim section, it's like, you're a student who's arrived in town and you've got to like decide which extracurricular activities you're going to do and which friends you're going to hang out with and
does that craft
uh
your character in some way?
yeah, so like depending on which friend you hang out with will depend on like which of your I guess personas or abilities will get stronger.
Hmm.
And depending on what activities you do, maybe you're going to build up your courage, which will allow you to ask out girls, or you'll build up your diligence, which will allow you to take better paying jobs. And jobs will give you money and like understanding and stuff so that you can build relationships with other characters. And so it's always layered in a way like, for example, you can join the soccer club or you can join the basketball club, but you can't do both.
Okay.
And so then you can join, I think it was music or drama, but you can't do both. And whichever one you choose to do, the schedule is going to conflict with the sports that you do, so you can't do both on the same day.
And this is I think it's just like the setting is just Japan or something, is that
Yeah,
right?
it's like a rural Japan town of like a population of like 1,000 or something.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like a modern era sort of thing. So I kind of got interested in it. I heard really good things about it, and so I bought it last year when it was on sale for like
Hmm.
$5 or something. Um,
Nice. You're actually playing like the physical media game?
no, it's the PSN version
Ah,
on my
cool.
on my PlayStation 3.
Cool.
But yeah, I kind of bumped it. That wasn't originally on my priority list for this year, but I kind of bumped it up because I heard good things about Persona 5, which is coming out soon. I was like, let's
Rock on.
change stuff up. Let's play something else.
Cool, cool. Uh, were you playing a few games at once? I feel like,
Yeah, I'm playing
yeah.
Suikoden 2 as well.
Haven't you
Um,
finished that like several times?
no, no, that's my first playthrough.
Oh, really? How's that going?
It's going good. It's a lot more standard. It does do some unique things as well. Like, it's got an interesting like tactical RPG system where you'll fight with armies every now and then instead
Right.
of just like your main characters. Um, the problem that I have with it is that the world is actually quite large. Like you can explore fairly early on to a large number of towns,
Okay.
but there's no reason to. And if you're not careful, it's easy to like because of the speed of the text and stuff, I'm constantly just pressing the X button to
Mm,
like speed up what people are saying,
right.
and then it'll get to like a piece of instruction or did you understand this or whatever, and I just click yes before I get a chance to read it. And so sometimes I actually miss what I'm supposed to do next, and then there's nothing in the story that tells me what I'm supposed to do next, so I just have to wander around until I find the right place to go.
Yeah, I'm pretty sick of that kind of game. I mean, I I'd have to play play it to get a real feel, but
Yeah,
just generally speaking.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's I guess my own impatience is my worst enemy for that game.
Mm,
But it's fun. I play that on the PSP, so I'm playing that like during my commute and on my exercise bike and
awesome.
while I'm putting my kid to sleep. So
Awesome. Very cool. Well,
yeah,
I think as you know, I've had this uh, kind of stay at home week going on.
yeah, yeah,
And so I found that when I had more regularity in my schedule, it was actually easier to get games in.
yeah,
And now that like it's all free time, it's like I don't know that kind of self-dictated. Like I will play games at this time. I will do this at this time. I will do this at this
Yeah.
time. Once that schedule goes out the window, it's kind of weirdly difficult to like find time. I don't know. I'm finding I'm a very maybe it's because uh, since leaving university, I've like gotten married and had kids, and there's just so much randomness in my life now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find it very difficult. I'm a very I have to be consistent with things, or it all falls apart. Kind of even with like my hobbies. So it's been a
You
weird
know.
week for me. I just haven't made it happen for a lot of things, for game time and
Yeah.
for
You
anything.
know,
So
you're to a smaller extent experiencing what I experienced when I was in San Francisco.
right, yeah.
Because it was the
I
same way. Like, so for yeah, like when we were both living in Vancouver at the same time, we would meet up weekly, I think, and we were trying to work on a little indie game in our hobby time.
yeah,
And we both were working full time, so it was like very specific times that we had available to work on stuff, and I found it so easy to be productive.
mm,
But then I quit my job and moved to San Francisco to live with my wife, and I wasn't allowed to have a job, and suddenly all of my time was spare time, and suddenly it became extremely difficult for me to structure anything.
yeah. But the thing is, it's so weird because I used to be good at that. I
Yeah.
used to be good at that, and I think, I mean, I take responsibility for my life and everything. But I think what it is that's difficult for me is like having these kind of chaotic elements in my life, like
Yeah.
not so much my wife, my wife, but my especially my kid, who I mean, she lives by no set schedule at all. So I'm not
Yeah.
guaranteed any time slots anymore. I can't say
Yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
going to do whatever from 9 a.m. every day or whatever. And so
Yeah.
I just I don't know. It's just been very weird for me.
Yeah.
Not just on the gaming front, but just anything. Like I had all these ideas of things I'd kind of get done over this 2 week period, and yeah, it's not really happening. But I've been getting uh, uh, a lot of stuff set up. I guess I'm cleaning up my room, and I'm uh, kind of trying to get more flashcards. I don't know if I mentioned that previously.
Right.
Yeah, so working on that. So it's like since I know that my structured life will come back at some point, I'm like kind of getting ready to pounce
Yeah.
on it when it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think the biggest problem is just having a kid.
Yeah, that's I can
It's
spin it
like
how I want.
yeah, however we want to spin it. The problem is once you've got a kid, spare time isn't spare time in quite the same way anymore.
Yeah, and I think that it's it was interesting. Say 10 years ago, you just wake up on a Saturday and it's like you have nothing to do. So I'll just I've been playing this game. I'll just play it, or I'm
Yeah.
working on this thing. I'll just work on it. Now it's almost like it's so different because spare time is something I fight for. Like I get up early or I stay up late or
Yeah.
I specifically schedule something where my wife looks after the kid for however long and so on and so forth. And it's a different kind of spare time now because you either like I either plan ahead how I'm going to use it and then I use it for that, or if I don't have anything planned and I just suddenly have it, I'm so not used to that. It's like, whoa, free time, and I just can't
Yeah.
like I don't know, take it and do what I want with it because I'm not my mind is not ready to handle free time anymore or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I will say, is both going back to Persona and then hopefully segueing into what we want to talk about, is one thing that I've noticed about playing this PlayStation 2 game on the PlayStation 3 is it was definitely designed for an old school CRT television.
Okay.
Like you can tell how every now and then they'll like put like a black screen over something to just like transition into the next scene. Uh, except the black doesn't cover the entire screen. There's like a slight little bits at the very edge where you can still see
Right.
what was underneath it.
Okay.
So I find it interesting when you go back and you can see artifacts of the how games used to be, and so I'm curious because our topic today was going to be ROM hacking.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because you've done a little bit of that. I never have, but is that sort of thing something that you ever came across where there was like stuff in the game that I don't know is like oddly limited or
So that's an interesting question. The whole ROM hacking topic is, of course, quite broad, and I can
yeah,
speak to
yeah,
it. And there's a lot of fascinating things one encounters. Um, Spinning it more, less kind of ROM hacking, and more, I
yeah,
guess,
yeah,
just like when emulation was born, if you will, and
yeah,
kind of what that was like to go in and see the insides of these games and kind of just get the raw data and be able to look at like the whole sprite table and as emulators being there as emulators were kind of being developed from rather uh, uh, hacked up things into these very crafted well running things.
yeah.
um, you did see that a lot, and you saw a lot of like uh, I guess
'Cause I guess it was easier for you to like lift the sheet, the curtain up, and see
exactly
what's going
exactly
on behind the
exactly
scenes, right?
it was it so I'm trying to think of a really good example. Of course, nothing's going, but it's like first of all, a lot of televisions would actually cut off the top and bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you knew that. Probably, I think it's common, but
Yeah, yeah. So yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with that from doing animation. Like
sure, great.
we always had to leave. I think it was about 10% of our image on all four sides of the screen. We was called TV cutoff, and we just
Mm.
assumed that that was there so that we would have lines not just like terminating and stuff,
Ah,
but that stuff would just probably not get seen by the audience.
right.
And then I think there was another 10% little border that you would never try to put any sort of text there because the edges of the screen would be kind of blurry or warped and stuff, and if you had text there it would be not
Ah,
nearly as legible as in the middle of the screen.
got it. Got it. Well, from the say the original Nintendo, which is kind of where I lived, if you will,
Yeah,
from their point of view, it was a little different and a little bit the same, I think. So,
yeah,
like, just the way the image that was actually created by the Nintendo, and then displayed to the screen, and the way it was displayed to the screen, you were guaranteed to cut off the bottom. I forget actually. I think it was 8 rows, 8 or so rows of pixels.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Guaranteed, they were just simply not there. But then also, furthermore, depending on the TV, you have TVs that will cut off more, just the way their picture is
mm-hmm.
structured. And then
Yep.
especially if you go way back, like obviously it's adjustable, right? I don't know if you had one of those really old TVs where you could adjust the I
Yeah, I
forget
think
what
we did at one point.
yeah, the vertical width and height and stuff, and the image jumps around on the screen. So obviously people would adjust them to their tastes, but like I actually, even in my nerdy room here, have a few TVs. Some of them cut the image differently than others, and it's a deal breaker for me. Actually, I got a really nice CRT, as nice as a CRT can be. It's like a late stage flat screen.
Yeah, yeah,
It looks like it would be super ideal, except there's not very much customized. Like I can't really customize the image.
yeah,
There's not much settings I can do, and then it
yeah.
cuts off the far right column of pixels. It's a huge deal breaker. So I mean, I can pop in a game and it'll literally say like on the far right, it'll say like score without the E, like it'll cut off that much.
Yeah.
So anyway, when emulators came out, you got that, which was very interesting because some games very annoyingly kind of like glitch out at the bottom,
Right.
and so you'd have like either like sprite data that is kind of flickering in the bottom, or you'd have like as you're running around and the screen is scrolling, you'd have like I don't know how to explain it, like just garbage data that would scroll with you. So you'd see
Yeah.
things kind of flying by. I find a lot of modern emulators will like they actually have settings where you can mask the bottom eight, or they have whatever settings that
Right.
try and reproduce the experience exactly as it was when one was playing in their youth or whatever.
Yeah,
But
like the
as
lab,
emulators were
like
just coming out, that
scan
was
lines.
yeah, scan lines. People would you'd see a lot more of that, and that was a lot of fun too. And then I guess another weird thing was kind of yeah.
When did you get in on doing the emulation stuff? Because I remember like pretty much the first time I went over to your house, you had a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't think I ever had an emulator until even after I went to college, I think.
Wow. Okay. I remember it was 1998, which
Okay.
is I don't know when NES Stickle
Sure.
came out. That's
So
kind of the
that's
famous.
basically as soon as you got the internet.
Kind of, yeah, actually. I remember because my parents took a vacation somewhere and they dumped me at my neighbor's house, and those guys were big time like hackers and geeks and stuff. And they
Right.
showed me they showed me this world of things. I remember I just could not believe, like, I mean, I was naive at the time or whatever. I could not believe you could play a Nintendo game on a computer. Like I didn't know. Now it's just so obvious. I mean, it's just data.
Yeah.
It's ones and zeros, right? But at the time, it was like I didn't think these two things were compatible in any way. It was
Yeah. I mean, one's
inconceivable
a
to me.
physical cartridge. You can see the little metal prongs.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, as a child, it was like I don't know. It was as if they were different mediums in my mind.
Yeah.
It was like I can't think of a good example, but like sound and like physical pictures. Like the picture doesn't make sound. You know what I mean? It didn't seem like some like
Yeah.
they felt very orthogonal for some reason.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just blew my mind, and that was kind of I mean, I really hopped in there and was uh uh that really kind of kicked off my in all honesty emulation, I would say, and just actually getting access to all these games that hadn't been released in America and so on and so forth. Really
Yeah.
kind of jump started my interest, or I guess solidified in a way my interest in I guess computer science and more software-y stuff, and even like kind of in things from abroad and just like this hacker culture. Like a lot of the things I'm
Yeah.
still pretty much into was really kickstarted by emulation and suddenly being able to play these import games and stuff. So it was a big changing point in my life, actually. Interesting.
Mm. Yeah, it's weird. I kind of I don't know if it's just because I tend to yeah, I for some reason will focus on the big picture, but sometimes I also have difficulty seeing the big picture.
Hmm.
So it's like when I was first exposed to emulation, like I went to a friend's house and he was playing a translated copy of Final Fantasy V.
Hmm.
And for me it was like that was I think the first time I even became aware of there being a Final Fantasy V.
Yep.
But I also felt like, well, I mean, if Japan, like if Square wasn't confident enough in their game to release it here, why would I want to play a shitty fan translation of it?
I took a very different approach, which is funny.
And so that's why I like just didn't even bother paying any more attention to it than that.
Wow. See, for me, it was like so incredible that these Final Fantasy games
Yeah.
existed that we never got. And
Yeah.
the fact they were fan translations was to me a kind of a temporary, almost like a
Band-aid.
patch, if you will, because I was trying to like learn the language at the time and so forth. So
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to go for the real thing, but in the meantime, here's this, essentially this hack that you could play, that would tide me over until I was good enough if I was still cared about this game at the time, to then play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I totally never had any interest in that at all. Like
Wow.
I've still never played an import game. I mean, I guess I was trying to do Japanese a year or more ago, and so I was trying to play stuff in Japanese, but it's totally not the same deal as what you were doing. And so you actually got in on the scene of doing the ROM hacking as well, right? It wasn't just playing, but you were actually tearing the stuff apart and modifying it.
Yeah, to some extent. I was actually bigger on the so the main ROM hack scene was more it was people who would actually kind of the hackers themselves and then the translator people, and I was actually more
Right.
active on the translation side. It was mostly people doing fan translations, really.
Right.
You had a lot of I guess kind of hacks, or like what's the word I'm looking for? Like people would edit the levels and re-release the game, or they'd like skin the game with their
Yeah.
own cool styles or whatever. And I was into that a lot as well. Actually, I was doing like there was this big movement to kind of take. It's funny now, but at the time, I think a lot of people were experiencing the same thing as me, where it's like we were suddenly had access to this new world of like Japan only games, and this is how things
Yeah.
were supposed to be, and they got ruined when they came over here, or like this weird attitude that like uh, since Nintendo of America was bigger on censorship, we had to restore all these things that had been lost or something. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who would like take games and they'd take what was in the Japanese ROM and take that the images, they restore the original artwork, if you will.
Yeah.
So again,
So
nowadays
like River City Ransom.
well, more like say like going back to Final Fantasy, like you'd have like the I don't know, like the Medusa head was clearly this topless female form in the
Right.
Japanese
Right.
version, and it was like it had like a skimpy dress on in the American version, stuff like that. That's kind of
Right.
that's a particularly trivial example, but or even like the Castlevania games. Anytime there was like kind of Christian imagery, so you'd have like
Yeah. Yeah.
crosses in the background and stuff, and those get changed. So like restoring a lot of that. Um, and then also like just changing colors and stuff. Um, but I think it was interesting because even on the translation side, there was actually you had to go in and do some hacking. So like
Yeah.
typically the Japanese game cartridges. So first of all, I mean it's a well-known thing, but the cartridges were quite limited in size.
Right.
So going from Japanese to English, you benefited in that generally anyway. Assuming that the uh, the game was it had the full character set, you easily had enough room to put in the English letters, right? Because I mean, there's however many hundreds of Japanese letters, so you just take the first 26 of those, or the first 52, I guess, and change them to the lowercase and uppercase English letters, and then some punctuation. Whereas if it had been the other way around, you can see how that'd be difficult, right? You actually couldn't
Yeah. Yeah.
fit all the Japanese in. But then the problem you hit, so actually taking the English letters, the English characters, and inserting them into the game so that you could then use them in your translation was not a problem. But the problem was um, in the original script, Japanese just takes less room to write.
Yeah.
Um, I think like if you look at just Japanese text in like a book or on the internet,
Mhm.
it's generally I don't know maybe about the same, but that's just because each character is actually larger. Like the characters
Right.
in Japanese, Chinese, and I believe Korean, it's like all square,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
But
Where
yeah, you look at like basic words like water versus Mizu. It's like five
yeah,
characters instead of two characters, right?
definitely, definitely. But then that's I guess my point is when you're looking at that purely on like a tile basis, the
Yeah.
problem is even more severe because if you can write a single Japanese character, they're complicated enough that it's difficult to write one very, very small without losing legibility, whereas English, there's only so many letters. So if I write like the tiniest little R I can, you can probably still make it out. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, so I'm just saying you can shrink down English text a lot more than you can shrink down a lot of the Asian language texts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Especially
just
kanji.
yeah, yeah, and plus just the way like generally a Japanese character, since it's square, probably takes up as much room as say two, maybe even three English letters, like an I and an L and a space is probably approximately square depending on your font. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Now going back to 1989 or whatever, each one of these is simply a tile. So you'd have a Japanese character for say water, and in English that's six tiles, WATER space, right? And
Yeah.
so since the text of the game, like people talking and stuff, is literally just hexadecimal characters that are essentially they're kind of like pointers or offsets into like a character table. In the
Right.
Japanese, if someone said like, I'm going to the store, it's probably like whatever, like maybe eight characters. So you have eight hex symbols that correspond to whatever. And then when you go to put that in English, it's like, what the hell do we do? I'm going to the store is not going to fit in eight characters, right? So there's a lot of kind of creative stuff you'd have to do there, which was very interesting. I think a lot of the times it was literally just a matter of cutting stuff. There's nothing you could do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you just don't have the room, you just cut stuff. And that's actually what they did a lot in the real English translations, like the
Yeah.
official
Yeah.
ones. If you are walking around in say some RPG and you talk to multiple people and you notice these two people have the same line, they're saying the same thing. There's a good chance in the Japanese one that wasn't the case. They literally
Yeah.
just wiped what one of them was saying because it was pointless and had him say the same thing as another character just to
Right.
save room. Another thing you could do, there was some other creative tricks, but you could sometimes, not always, depending on a lot of things, but sometimes you could expand the ROM so you could actually give it more space.
Right.
There's things like checksums and like just the way that the mapping of data banks worked and so forth that made that usually very difficult. But depending on the game and the mappers it used, and even the system, if you could and like just kind of the way the checksum worked on the original image, if it didn't work out anymore, it would recognize itself as corrupt and not work right. Um, if you could manage to expand the actual ROM size, especially if you could simply double it, your life is much easier because then you just have tons of space to use, right? Like literally all that space could just be used for your text translation. Um, and again, the way it worked generally is like you'd have for each character they essentially kind of have a pointer to a place in the ROM that is just a sequence of hex characters that represents what they're saying, and then
Right.
that's like delimited by like it's kind of like the classic like null terminated string. It's not always null, but there's going to be some hex that represents the end of their line, or like special characters like a hex that would represent like a new line or something. And then each hex character is just an offset into a character table.
Right.
And so when doing actually like translations, not you'd have to, I guess, take multiple approaches to fit all this in. Some of it would be, like I said, kind of cutting lines, or sometimes like abbreviating things in certain ways, or like if the character originally said something more complicated, you could just be clever with the translation and kind of shrink what they're saying. If the person said, like, I don't know, I hate you so much, I'm going to kill you, blah, blah, blah. You could just change that to, you better watch it. There's just shortening kind of what they're saying, essentially, right? But then other interesting tricks would be like, for example, since the Japanese character set would take up however many tiles, I'm not thinking of it off the top of my it's not coming to me right now, but say like 200 tiles were used for Japanese characters, and then you put the English letters in, and they only take up the first 50 or so. You could do creative things with the rest of it. Like you could, if it's a Final Fantasy game, for example, and they say the word crystal 5 million times, then you would take the word crystal, and like how many letters is crystal? 7, I guess. And you could squish that. If you squish the characters together, you could squish it into say 4, and you'd have like kind of a custom set of 4 tiles that say crystal with the letters all squished together. And then anytime someone says crystal, instead of saying CRYST, you instead just say special character 1 2 3 4, and it's the word crystal squished in, and so it only takes 4 characters instead of 7, and so forth. Little tricks like that.
Right.
Or like I and L, or L and I, or TH, like common combinations of letters you'd put in a single tile and do little savings like that. And yeah, so that was quite interesting. Trying to think of what else would be happening. A lot of that kind of thing. Yeah, stuff like that. I guess another another interesting thing is just the tools that people would create to do this kind of work, of course. So since it's relatively the same workflow each time, obviously many exceptions to that, but generally you'd have a lot of like text editors that you'd kind of set them up to how the game structures things, if you know what I mean. So like basically think of everything I just said with like the special characters, like crystal fit into 4 characters and so forth, and you'd just have a text editor where it's conscious of those things. So you just type out the script, the translated script, and it would automatically convert what you've typed into the hex representation that the game will use, and it will recognize the special characters. So like if I type crystal, this will then convert it into that 4 hex sequence instead of whatever hex sequence. And then you have to like essentially burn this, kind of bake this back into the ROM and then play it. So it was interesting, actually. And like I found, as I know I'm jumping around, I'm going on a nostalgia trip, man. I'm jumping around a little bit, but as you were playing the game and kind of, I think what was fun was a lot of, especially for Japanese, I mean, it's a very contextual language, right? So if you just take a Japanese sentence out of nowhere, you'll have no idea what it means very often, right? So to be able to effectively translate a game, I mean, it was easy enough to just dump the script, but just reading the script without...
You wouldn't just be able to look at the script, though. You'd have to actually, like...
play the game.
Read it all in order, right?
Exactly. So And even then, it's quite difficult if it's a long game. I mean, you could play
Yeah.
it and play it very well and look for all the text and be very careful and whatever. And then you go to translate it and you'll see some line and it's like, clearly this was said by whatever character because this is the way they talk. And I remember this part of the game, so I know what they're talking about. But then this next line, I have no idea. I just don't remember. He's just saying like some sentence that could be interpreted in a few different ways.
Right.
And I think probably here's what he means. So let's go with that. But so you put it
And
in, and then you go play it and be like, what? That was weird. Why do you say that there, right?
yeah.
Or like maybe the Japanese game would use the same trick,
Yeah.
as I was saying, where like they'd have one character say some, they'd have one line of text that multiple characters say, and in
Yeah.
Japanese that line makes sense in all those places. In English, there's no one single line that makes sense in all those places. So you'd have to
Right.
go beyond just hacking in the new text and kind of hack. I mean, it's a little hack, but just find the character pointers and have them point to a different line or something. Like you just have to keep translating them, playing to check, and then translating and playing to check. And of course,
Yeah.
when you replace the whole Japanese character set with an English set, and then you go and play to check, all of a sudden, all the finished work, they'll speak to you in English, and then the next thing you know, you'll walk somewhere and say talk to someone else, and they speak to you in complete gibberish. It's just a bunch of junk, right? So you could like copy down their junk and then convert that, like, what those hexes that he was using are because you look at what the English characters were, it'd just be a bunch of
Right.
gibberish. You get the original hex and then go back to the original Japanese and find out what they were saying. So it's quite a laborious process.
Yeah, I imagine, especially for like a Final Fantasy game that's
Yeah.
hours long.
Yeah.
Not just something like Mario, where it's like,
Yep, exactly. And I think it was almost fun for me at the time, but like translating like item lists and stuff
right.
was generally easy. So generally within a game, those are located in the same location. So you'd have like whatever, like what I mean is you wouldn't have like a few items listed here and then way later in the ROM a few items listed here. Like generally the whole list would be in one place,
Right.
easily recognizable because you just see like fire helmet, water sword, like that, and you just
Yeah.
copy that, dump that whole list and translate it all. And so it was kind of fun because like you'd see everything in the game, right? Like translating it in a way is a huge spoiler because you're spoiling everything. You're seeing the entire text of the game there, right?
Yeah.
So you'd be translating through and you'd find weapons that you didn't find when you were actually playing the game and stuff like that.
Yeah, 'cause a lot of them would be like random drops from enemies and stuff, right?
Exactly. And that was fun too because I mean I was still I'm not by any means perfect at the language now, but at the time I was still very much a learner. So to learn all these like RPG words, like
Yeah.
I can't think of a good example, but some like flail of the afterlife or whatever, just these weird words would come out. And
Yeah.
so that could be difficult too. I found if it was enemy names.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was involved in the Dragon Quest V translation, which is funny because that's the most common like fan translation out there. Still now, even after like the game, I think there's an English version.
They
Yeah.
released an English version. Well, I don't know if they released like a Super Nintendo version of it, but you can get it on the 3DS.
Okay.
I don't remember if it's DS or 3DS, but it's like been remade to look like Dragon Quest 7. So it's like a fully three-dimensional like remake of the game with like a wholly new script.
Well, it was very fun for me being involved in that translation because it's a game everyone's heard of, and that's the translation that's out there everywhere. And it was just I don't know. I mean, it's so little a thing to be like proud of in some sense, which I'm not proud of anything, but it was just fun, I guess, to make a difference in a way, right? But like going through those like the enemy lists was weird because even the enemies are a little bit contextual, where it's like I just wouldn't. It's just like a made up word or something, right? So your choice is translate as is, which kind of half works for various reasons. Sometimes, so I'm trying to think of a good example, but like if there's a weird,
like if you call something an Oni versus calling it a goblin.
Kind of, I guess. Well, a good example from a different game entirely, but moblins or alternatively moblins in the Zelda games. Do you know what that's from?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, the word for forest in Japanese is like mori, right?
Right.
And so it's
So they're
actually
just forest goblins.
exactly forest goblins. That's it. But then it's like a Japanese word and an English word, like mori blin.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what they're called in the Japanese one. But then in the English one, they just kind of moblin or whatever, which works. It sounds cool, whatever. But I mean, if you're translating enemies and you get to that kind of enemy name, you just don't know, right? Like one could have maybe made the connection if they're looking at what's clearly a goblin and it's called
Yeah.
a moribudin, right? But if you just have the text, you don't know. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
weird little things they do like that, and like man, it's just a it's kind of a headache because you have to go and actually find what all these things are to get a good translation. And sometimes
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
make the choice like ultimately I want to just have a real translation every time, but maybe sometimes you kind of do have to make that creative choice and say, this was originally a weird pun in the Japanese version.
Yeah.
Should we go with the translation of that pun that's not going to make sense, or should we just make a new pun so that the English version kind of has that same experience, right?
Or shall we just call them a spoony bard?
Yeah, yeah. As you have seen examples of in official translations, right?
Yeah.
Case in point.
So I mean, one of the first Japanese books I attempted to read was I forget the actual name of it, but it was like a book of like onomatopoeia.
Right.
So and like a lot of the sounds, like there's just no equivalent in English.
Yeah.
So I imagine if you come across stuff like that, it's got to be
Definitely. Yeah.
like, what do I do here?
And it's not even
And
like
how do you
even
even look it up back in the days when like these online dictionaries aren't a thing?
well, even if you know the word, like what are you going to translate that to? Like
Yeah.
oftentimes that's another issue you face. You can translate something exactly, but in English it just feels like such a
Wrong.
weird thing for a person
Yeah.
to say or for a thing to be named.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that was kind of there was a bit of charm in the early days. I mean, so many people are so used to like that era of games being poorly translated, right? The whole all your base belong to us and all that stuff. And so it was almost kind of fun to I guess contribute to that in a way and just say, this is what they said in the original one. Let's just go with it. People are used to this kind of weird ass thing coming out in the games, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It was a case by case kind of choice you had to make. And of course we did this by community, right? Like
Right.
IRC was I don't know if I'm going to say it was big back then, but for me it was, and there was a
It
few.
felt big for me at the time.
Oh, really?
Like I went on IRC within the first 2 weeks of getting the internet.
Yeah.
Because it's like at the time, like there was no Google, there was no,
Mm.
Kotaku and Reddit and all that stuff. It's
Facebook
like
Messenger. It was kind of
yeah,
the
there's only
descendant
so
of
much.
bulletin board stuff, kind of, right?
The news lists.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, even like proper forums were a pretty limited thing at the time. So
Yeah.
there was only so much to do. So I don't know. I actually like was a host on an IRC role playing game.
Oh, really?
Uh,
Nice.
so yeah, it was. I don't know. Those are the good old days. And now it's like so weird because it's like you've got so many things like Discord and which is almost like an IRC channel, and you go on and it's weird.
Well, even like yeah. Well, even like I don't know, like Slack and like all these
Yeah.
different services. It's I don't know if people still use IRC. Maybe there's a
There are
flourishing community.
yeah, there are some people that still use
Probably.
it. It's definitely dying. Like
Mm.
Discord is definitely it's
Stealing its life.
essentially IRC that has permanence.
Hmm. I see.
So like you can log in and you can see the entire history of the chat.
Right.
So I think that's very much usurping the throne now.
I see. I wish I still had my IRC history because at the time,
Yeah.
anyway, I mean, life's very different now, but in like junior high, I mean, I was like incredibly introverted and like
Yeah.
IRC was like my life. So I mean, I
Yeah.
had like this online friend group, totally typical geeky stuff, but I was always in the Romhack channel, and
Yeah.
I just had so many interesting conversations and kind of virtually met all these other nerds from all over the place. So it was a lot of fun, I guess. Like I don't know if I want to ever go back to that lifestyle. I mean, I know I
Yeah.
don't, but it was part of my life that crafted me in a certain way. So it was interesting actually to be part of that. So the channel was hash Romhack, That was the big
Mm.
Romhack channel, so I was there all the time, and that was kind of my group of like online friends I'd hang out with and play games with and talk about games with for a good 3 years even maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, junior high, early high school, probably 3 years. Um, and yeah, I don't know, it was fun.
I used to, yeah, like I said, there was some Dungeons and Dragons style role playing games that we would do, and like we had a dice bot and stuff. Uh,
Nice.
and then I would also hang out on the Lothlorien chat room, which was for an art website called Elfwood.
Okay.
Like,
Elfwood,
yeah,
like fantasy art, I assume.
yeah, yeah. It was like one of the first big sites where like an artist could just go and upload their stuff and have their own little online gallery.
Like a precursor to what is it, deviant art or
Yeah,
concept art or something. Yeah.
yep, way before those.
Nerds, we're awesome. Yeah, I was a member of a few communities. I did a few of. I wasn't like hardcore into like the gaming kind of Dungeons and Dragonsy stuff,
Yeah.
but I had uh, kind of been part of that, mostly experimental stuff like that. Romhack was the big one I was on. I don't know. There's some other ones. I don't know. I was part of Hash Japan and Hash whatever else too. So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting
Nice.
days. Yeah, yeah. So in all honesty, my ROM, it's fun to look back on it and say ROM hacking, but it was mostly limited to translations of
Translation.
stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was some opportunity to be creative. It's less technically interesting, but you'd have like say a title screen you had to translate,
Yeah.
and so that's literally just a big sprite essentially.
Right.
You just hack in a new sprite, so you could either make something up or sometimes it was like maybe there's like a Japanese logo and just a little bit of text, so you just replace that with English text. So that's kind of interesting as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
There we go.
fun
We're
stuff.
coming up on over half an hour now. Well
All right.
over half an hour. So what are you playing this week? We talked about what I'm playing.
Oh
Did you get
man,
any time in at all, or
uh, I don't know. I've gotten specks of time. I'm still trying to beat FTL actually,
right?
and I'm really so I feel like lately I've been like, here's my big game list. I'm gonna finish these, and I'm gonna go through this one, and then this one, and then this one, and that's cool. But I
It's
like
totally legit to just enjoy a game and
exactly
stick with
right.
it.
It's like if you just turn like people who like television, I guess, turning the
Yeah.
television on, just flicking channels versus like I'm gonna watch everything from this show, then everything from this show. So um, I've been doing more of the kind of the yeah that kind of just turn on games and play them thing. So playing a little bit of kind of digging through my Super Nintendo library and trying to find games I haven't uh, played enough of. That's been kind of interesting. Playing a little bit of Super Metroid, actually, reliving the good old days. I don't know if you've
Nice.
heard of. Have you heard of Sanrio,
As
the
in,
company?
yeah,
Yes. Okay. Well, there's
yeah,
a
Hello Kitty, right?
yeah, and there are other line of characters and stuff. But there's a game they have called Sanrio Super Smash Ball on Super Nintendo, and
Okay.
it's surprisingly very very fun. It's just like a almost like a dodgeball-y kind of game, but it has their characters, so it's all cutesy, but it's just
Right.
this competitive Super Nintendo game. I used to play with a friend quite a lot actually, so just playing some of that. But really, when I do get a chance here and there to play games, mostly FTL, trying to beat it on normal and not really succeeding uh, yet anyway. So not so much interesting on my end right now, but
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like juggling a few things. I guess, like I said, Persona 4 and Suikoden 2. I'm also taking French classes right now on
Oh,
Tuesdays and
really?
Thursdays. So
Wow.
I've been playing through Influent in French as well, trying to brush up on my vocabulary a little bit. Um,
Very
which
cool.
was surprisingly helpful. Like I had played through a bunch and like learned words for like floor and ceiling and
Hmm.
desk and all that stuff. And some of which I don't think I ever actually learned in the first place. Like I don't think they ever taught us floor and wall and ceiling or light switch.
I probably
Um,
don't know any of those words.
but So it's like I did them, and then by coincidence, the very next class, like the teacher started going over some of that stuff, and I was like, "Oh yeah,
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's
I wasn't just wasting time."
well, it's nice to learn words that are like relevant to one's life, or like you wake up in the morning and the first thing you see is your ceiling, and you get out of your bed, like those words, right?
Well, that's kind of what I feel is weird about it, is because like I was playing the game and I kind of felt like it was a waste of time. Because when was the last time I ever used the word ceiling talking to someone or talked about the wall or whatever? Like when I talk to people, it's about like the games I'm playing or what I'm doing at work or
Those are the words I need, man.
what's for dinner and stuff. It's
Yeah.
like I talk about activities and like beliefs and what's on the news and stuff way more than I talk about the physical environment around me.
Hmm.
So, uh, uh, I don't know. It's weird. I've got a little list of like the 100 most used or like 1,000 most used words in French or whatever, and I'm hoping to
Hmm.
start picking my way through that. But
But you really do need those words just because they come up. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
but I mean, even like talking about your beliefs, or as you say, like, what if, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example, but like in a game, maybe your character looks at the ceiling. So it's
yeah,
relevant to games very much in that it describes the world in the game, or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, Stealing it back for 2 seconds. The game
yep,
I'm tell people I'm playing that I didn't play this week is Gargoyle's Quest. I'm just
right,
trying to
right.
finish it, and it's weird because
I think you first told me that you were playing that back in like November or
oh
something.
man, well it's not even that long a game, and I'm at the very end. It's just it's password based,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm playing it on the Super Game Boy, and so like every time I come in my room, either I have a kid with me who won't let me play anything
yeah,
seriously, or I don't have the password on me, or there's some reason I can't just turn it on and go, right? Which is why I've been playing a lot more FTL because it's, I'll be kind of working on something and then I'll have maybe 20 minutes before bedtime. So just press go and you go, right? It's just so easy access. So
yeah.
when I stop being lazy and just get on it, that's the next game I'm going to really finish here.
Awesome.
Yeah, fun
All
games.
right. Well,
Cool,
I
man.
think that's the end of our podcast for this week.
All right. Well, until next time.
Catch you later.
Cheers.